Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
Yeah, I mean, every game's important. We got a lot of stuff left that we still want to do, and at the end of the day, it just comes down to hitting people. You know what I mean? So, I know there's a lot of other stuff going on, but I think we're starting to hit somebody.
It's a simple game, isn't it? Courtesy of Jennings Dunker. Welcome to our Wednesday edition of Eye on the Hawks. Mitch Fick, Owen Sebring, Mike Howell here. Lots to get to certainly on a Wednesday as we look ahead to their Big Ten team now. Washington coming in at 4-2, coming off a big upset win over Michigan on the weekend. We'll talk about that. Certainly continue to dive into a game that's almost 30 years in the making. Been a while since the Hawkeyes and Huskies have tangled. We'll also look at our picks for the week, and we'll highlight somebody who we've highlighted quite a bit over the last year or so, but it bears highlighting yet again in 2024. We start, though, with something you guys covered extensively on Monday. Caleb Brown, LaShawn Williams, the eras are over in Iowa City. That news coming out early on Monday. On Tuesday, Kirk Ferentz speaking at length for the first time since KB and Boogie decided to head out of Iowa City.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd start with, and I think I used this line before a while ago, you can't lose what you didn't have. So, if somebody really hasn't been out playing, it's not like you're losing a lot of contribution, if that makes any sense. And I don't know what the stats are on either player we're talking about this season. If LaShawn had left last November, that would have been impactful because he was right in the thick of it, and he was our best option at that point, and was playing very well, too. I just want to compliment him. But it's really not the case now, and I just talked about the injuries. That's affected him greatly, really, since April. And I feel bad. I feel bad anytime a player can't do what they want to do that way. But the bottom line is this, not to be callous, but if a player is really not playing, it's not like you lose anything that way. And then the other part of it, fall back on the line from Mike Tomlin about you don't want hostages on your team. Again, it doesn't do anybody any good, especially the individuals, to be in an environment where they're not enthused to be there. It's just not good for anybody.
The train's still moving forward. Like, we want to, for the guys who left, wish them all the best. They, made their decisions, but, our focus is on who's here and who wants to be here and, who wants to help this team succeed.
I think that they made the best decisions that they thought for themselves, and, we don't want to have people held hostage here. So I guess if you don't want to be here, and you think that's not the best for you, that is what it is,
We don't have any prisoners. Like, I woke up and came here by choice. So if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. So everybody's got that choice. We respect everyone's opinion.
You guys certainly covered the departures, at least the statistical side, extensively on Monday. Thoughts, Owen, after hearing from Kirk? A lot of that soundbite, I should say part of that soundbite, made a lot of the rounds on social media. People reacted to it certain ways, because Lord knows we don't need context when we listen to things. But after talking to the guys, you hear the word hostage, don't want those, everything like that. What were your thoughts after talking to everybody?
That idea makes sense. It's a harsh word, and Jay used the word kind of like, we don't want a prisoner, like we don't want a hostage. We want people to be free to do what they want. The one soundbite that they all kind of gave is that they all do wish the best for these guys. Like they love Caleb, they love LaShawn. One thing Jamari Harris said was like, hey, this team is a family, and Jamari said, I still consider those guys family, so we really want the best for them. And I think that there's not a lot of ill will. The one thing that I think about is something that Scott Docterman pointed out to Jay yesterday. He was like, the situations between LaShawn and Caleb are pretty different, but he was like, LaShawn, he deserves a senior day. Like, he's been part of this program for so long and was such a huge part of the team last year and was instrumental in so many of those wins against Washington, against Nebraska. He was such a crucial piece in those wins that's a guy who deserved to have Hawkeye fans recognize him on senior day. So it's just sad, especially for him, to see him leave the program without kind of getting a final goodbye.
Yeah, you're watching, if you're on the YouTube page, watching some of the Caleb Brown highlights. Of course, the one highlight from this year was that gainer against Troy. Other than that, the last time we really saw him on the field was that one route against Minnesota that was just a little off, but certainly came in with all the expectation in the world, being a highly rated high school recruit coming out of Ohio State, where he was a receiver for Brian Hartline and company. But yeah, going back and cutting LaShawn Williams' video, and we'll start playing that on the YouTube channel here in a bit. You talked about it, just the Wisconsin run, such an iconic moment. The run to set up Marshall Meter in Lincoln. You know, two of the most iconic running plays you could argue in the last decade for Iowa football came courtesy of LaShawn Williams, and had the huge day against Western Michigan too. He was an All Big Ten back last year. It's tough to see him leave in these circumstances, but you know, you're watching the video now. The first shot we had of him all year, he was out. He was hurt for a game and was walking around during spring with a boot on his foot. He has just really struggled to get healthy, and that's maybe one of the reasons that it's allowed the door to open for Jazz to get a little more work and for Kamari to get a little more work. Caleb is Caleb right now, Caleb Johnson, and I know they're really high on guys like Xavier Williams and Brevin Dahl and other guys there in the running back room. So it's tough. I think you're right. It would have been great to have an opportunity for Hawkeye fans to get to say goodbye to a guy who has produced so many incredible moments and was just so banged up in the last 6 months or so. But as a football coach nearby us once said, that's football sometimes.
And Kirk kind of pointed out something that me and Mike talked about on Monday that I think confirmed to be true, was that LaShawn was injured, and he saw the running backs producing in front of him, and he knew that when he came back, Caleb was going to still be getting all the number 1 reps, and Jazz was looking so good that he was probably going to be getting a lot of the number 2 reps. And so even if he got back to full strength, it was going to be a long road to him actually getting significant touches in the Iowa running back room again, which is just kind of the way of the game sometimes.
Yeah, and for how much people like bash on the new system, it is kind of cool that like LaShawn saw the writing on the wall and he's buried, he's injured, and he's like, man, I can still, you know, have a productive year somewhere else. And I think that's a cool part of this new system, as much as people will say players are leaving and it's a detriment to the school, to the fans, and to whatever. I still like that aspect that players can, you know, this is going to be probably his last year of, you know, producing. I don't know if he's going to play in the next level. So I'm happy for him that he gets that chance. And, you know, I do think it's two different stories too, because Caleb, you know, he has all that potential, but he hasn't really played much. So it's not like he was held back by an injury. It was either, you know, not producing in practice, or, you know, the stuff on the off season obviously played a role in the first game at least. So two different situations, and I'm glad they both can move on. And I like the idea, like, you know, like they said, like, if you don't want to be here, you're not fully committed, it's probably best for both parties to get out.
Yeah. It does sound a little callous without the context, maybe, of just, well, we can't lose what we didn't have. And, you know, I think people...
That did seem a little harsh.
Bristled a little at it, but, you know, the point he's trying to make is you got one guy who's been banged up and has been playing this year. The other one has very limited snaps. This is what we've been doing without them. So, you know, expectation and anticipation are two powerful drugs, and it sometimes maybe cloud what's going on. And, yeah, it's tough to say goodbye, especially, you know, LaShawn and everything he's done, Caleb and everything that was maybe expected of him. But you move on, and certainly you have to turn the page, so to speak, after Columbus. And you look ahead to the first home game for Iowa in more than a calendar month, or almost a calendar month, October 14th. It's
been a while.
And I believe, it's been a little while, or it'll be October 12th, I should say, as Washington comes to town as a Big Ten team coming off one of the big upsets we've seen in the Big Ten already this year, that win against Michigan last week at home in Seattle. A team that Iowa hasn't played against since the Sun Bowl almost 30 years ago. And boy, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, these are the kind of gifts you get, because we dive into the archives. You got the black bars on the side of the video. That's how you know it's old. And great shots there. Get to see Hayden Fry and company out there. Again, a great Pac-10, Big Ten, Pac-12, Big Ten rivalry back in the glory days. And you get to watch a little bit of it there. But a game that I think a lot of people, when it came onto the schedule for 2024, and you got other West Coast teams coming in next year for Iowa to play in this expanded Big Ten. But this is one that people were really, really excited about, because the games between Iowa and Wisconsin and Washington, as rare as they've been, as you see Cedric, those banana peel shoulder pads. If you're watching on YouTube, we're going to get mesmerized by the uniforms. But this has always been one of the really fun bowl matchups, maybe because of the stages they're on. Iowa and Washington, two, you know, fairly storied programs in and of themselves. This is a fun one. People had really been looking forward to this because it was the really, truly new game that was going to be in Kinnick. Obviously, they go to LA in a month to play UCLA, but this is one I think a lot of people were talking about.
Yeah, just because of the history there, and if you're watching on the YouTube page, you can see Mike's dandy of a sweatshirt that he's wearing today, throwback to the 1991 Rose Bowl between Iowa and Washington. Just that history that these two teams have. I mean, I'm not sure if a lot of people look back and think, oh, wow, that Sun Bowl, but there's 2 Rose Bowls between these two teams. You got Mark Brunell against the Hawkeyes in 91. Like, there's just a lot for being a Big Ten Pac-12 series for a lot of years. These two fan bases historically really do remember each other, and I mean, I'm not going to say this is going to turn into a trophy game level rivalry, but at least it's kind of a fun series to renew.
It's interesting too, because when you're looking at it on the schedule last year, Washington was one of the best teams in the country. They played a national title game, and they had Michael Penix and Rome Odunze, a lot of good receivers, James Polk. This game, it's been like a roller coaster of expectations too, because when you first see it, like, oh, it's going to be a tough matchup. Then everyone leaves. You knew that the top level guys were going to leave, but you didn't know that they were going to have such a mass exodus. Kalen DeBoer goes to Alabama. They get in Jed Fish then. Will Rogers had committed before Fish was, hired. Then he's like, okay, I'm recommitting, stuff like that. And then they have like 50 new transfers or new bodies and 2 returning starters. And then you're like, okay, maybe this will be an easier game for Iowa. And then they beat Michigan last week, and you're like, Michigan was ranked 10th. I don't think they deserve that 10th ranking because they really can't pass the ball, but it was an eye-opener to me, at least when I opened my app at a wedding on Saturday. I was like, ooh, I thought Michigan was going to win that game.
Yeah, it's to your point, this is not a Washington team that has the names that were on the marquee in 2023, but you can tell when they're at their best, they are really tough, and we'll get into, you mentioned Will Rogers, some other really, really nice-looking playmakers the Huskies have. But first, let's hear from the Hawkeyes, getting ready for a team that's in the top 20 in the nation in passing offense, and runs the ball pretty well, too, as the Hawkeyes get ready for the Huskies.
I see a lot of passing. It's going to be fun. I believe a crazy stat where I think 3rd and 1 is 90% run, and 3rd and 2 is about 52% pass. So you don't see that often, especially in our league. I think in our league in general this year has been totally different. I've been here for a while, and I just feel as though it's more of a passing league, faster league, really taking more into the NFL almost, especially with Minnesota a couple years ago. That completely surprised me. I've never played a Minnesota team that came out and throw the ball almost 40 times. So each and every day, it's coming out just focusing on smaller details, it's going to lead to success over time.
Yeah, great players. Their running back, one's violent, fast, violent, strong, forceful. And the tight end, he's huge. He's just huge on tape. Honestly, on tape, kind of looks, man, he might be taller than Luke. I don't know the official height on him, but geez. But then their receiver, really talented, and then their O-line, they're just, they move people out the way. They make blocks, and they free up some holes for that running back.
It's similar to last week, quite frankly. They've got a good receiver core. And they too, and I think one of Ohio State's secrets, not that I coach there, but, as you guys saw, they make you play the run. Like, they ran the ball extremely well. They've got good players, and they're not one-dimensional. And I'd say the same thing about Washington, that the back is a really good player, and they got a couple guys behind him that are good, but he's a really good player. And, it's how you call the plays, and they're going to, you can't just sit back and play defense, pass defense. You got to honor the run of this team. Guys up front do a good job, and the quarterback's really dangerous throwing the football. So they're truly balanced.
Balanced, and they don't turn it over. Will Rogers, 12 touchdowns, just 1 interception. And if you watch that game on Saturday with Michigan, that was a heck of an interception by the Wolverine linebacker. So Will Rogers taking care of the football. You like your quarterback to do that. You heard about the violent running of Jonah Coleman, a transfer in from Arizona, 600-plus yards, 5 touchdowns on the ground. He's got more than 100 yards receiving, too. He does damage. You heard from Jamari Harris off the top there talking about getting ready for this passing game. Denzel Boston, who got swallowed up in the passing game last year just because you had guys like Rome Odunze and everybody else. 35 catches. He has 8 touchdowns already. He's pushing 500 yards receiving. He's a big-bodied dude who can be trouble for a secondary. And then Giles Jackson, a guy who's your number 2 but also leads the team in catches with 38 catches. Denzel, I would kind of set is the number 1. Giles had 10 of his 38 catches were in the opener against Weber State. Jeremiah Hunter, not the old Iowa linebacker, the number 3 receiver for the Huskies, 19 catches already. You heard Nick Jackson talking about Latu, the tight end. He's got 20 catches. They've got another freshman, DeGraff, who's got 5 grabs. A couple have been really long. I think he's averaging like 25 yards a catch. He's kind of a tight end deep threat, kind of built like a Stranga, maybe a little faster than Addison, and Addison, of course, out for this game. This is a Washington offense that's got a lot of pieces, and against a defense that's been giving up big plays, the collar gets a little tight, maybe.
Yeah, and this is a team that going into the year, everybody knew that Ohio State was going to be the toughest game on the schedule. Now that Iowa's past that, you think, boy, what's the toughest game left? This might be, at least top two, I would say, toughest game left on the schedule. Again, not a lot of people knew what Washington was going to bring to the table coming into the year, but they've proven that they can beat some teams. They've got, as great as their offense is, they've got a solid defense too. Kept a few teams in single digits this year. I want to point out a couple of guys. Number one, on defense, their leading tackler is Carson Bruner, a tie-in to that 1991 Rose Bowl team.
Oh, yeah?
His dad was Mark Bruner, who was a tight end who played the NFL for a number of years. He played at Washington, and he was a freshman on that 91 Rose Bowl team that beat Iowa. And,
Interesting.
That Husky team was dubbed the national champions that year after winning the Rose Bowl. So he now is coming on that team. Got another great linebacker, Alfonso Tupatala. Like, their defense is maybe not quite what their offense is, but they're a solid unit too. One of the biggest keys, I think, for Saturday is, Iowa for a lot of this year has been kind of a bend but don't break situation. That's going to be maybe the biggest storyline because Washington's kicker, Grady Gross, only 9 of 15 on field goals this year. He's missed one from 30 plus, one from 20 plus, a couple from 50 plus, a couple from 40 plus. Like, if they can put that guy on the field rather than giving up touchdowns, that could be a major key to success for them, is putting that kicker on the field for Washington.
Yeah, had an opportunity to beat Rutgers on a kick or tie it up and send it to overtime. That was a Friday night game a couple weeks ago. One of the two losses the Huskies have. The other one they lost, that rivalry game, the Apple Cup there against Wazoo. Number 3 passing defense in the country, the Huskies are. Now, granted, you go up against a team like Michigan who struggles to pass. Maybe they just found their quarterback, though, on Saturday in Jack Tuttle, so maybe that number gets a little skewed. But the number 10 scoring defense, rush defense is in the top 60, 58th overall, but an opportunity to look at those numbers if you're on the YouTube channel. This is a defense that, what can Iowa do against a team that really locks down on the pass defense? Iowa now 127th in the nation in passing, looking to get something going. Things looked good in the first half, but positive in the first half against Ohio State. But could be another chance to see Caleb Johnson not going up against a defense like Ohio State, only 58th in the nation in rush defense. Bit of a welcome reprieve as you get back home, get into the friendly confines, and play a team that's used to playing not at 9 a.m. their local time. Maybe some opportunities there.
That could be a huge factor in the game. Just the timing of the. I'm kind of glad it's that early. I think a lot of people thought this could be a night game. Who knows? But a big noon kickoff. Look at the weak spot of the defense is that rushing game. But this will be the third game in a row they play a rush-heavy, predominantly offense. With Iowa's going to try and run the ball with Caleb Johnson. They're just going to try. And against the third best pass defense, I think that's a good strategy. But I thought in the second half against Michigan last week, you could see him start to tighten up. So I think it might be a challenge to run against this team, especially if we've talked about it. That passing game just isn't quite there yet for Iowa.
Yeah. Kyle Mononga had 132 yards against them a couple weeks ago. Another guy who's getting a lot of talk about, a potential Doak Walker finalist. Along
5th
with
leading rusher in the country right now.
Yeah.
A couple behind, Caleb's at 2 right now. So
okay, yeah. So that's there for the taking. If this team wants to get its foot back rushing wise, this is a team to possibly do it against.
This is off the beaten path, and all the dialogue about quarterback and what Iowa's going to do. Brendan Sullivan comes in late, has a nice long run. Felt a little, the dialogue did, not the situation. The dialogue, though, felt a little Marco Lainez-esque after the bowl game of, well, he can move, you got to get him in there somehow. And yeah, that's what Brendan brings to the table. Washington's defense looked really tough against John Mateer, Washington State, that kid who's kind of taken the Pac-12 by storm, or the West Coast there, really been a good quarterback. I do think Cade's the starter. He's QB1. I think, despite what dialogue may be, I do think there's progress. He made some really nice throws before a third quarter that you'll want to flush forever on Saturday. This is a team, though, watching that tape and seeing what Mateer did against Washington, I think Brendan Sullivan's package, so to speak, maybe gets a little more expanded, and I think there's just enough tape where it can, that he's a guy that can get out there and maybe have a few more opportunities. I think it's still Cade, bulk of the carries, but I do wonder if that if there's more Brendan Sullivan on Saturday to take advantage of what we saw in the Apple Cup and what John Mateer was able to do this defense.
That'd be a welcome sight, I think, as an Iowa fan. Just it's effective in the red zone, and it has been all season. Last week we didn't get to the red zone, so we couldn't see it. Washington does the same thing. They did it last week against Michigan.
Damon Williams.
Nice. They brought him in, and he can throw too. And that's what I like about Brandon Sullivan is we haven't seen it at Iowa much because he hasn't got that much playing time, but you saw it last year, and for Northwestern, especially against Maryland, he can move the ball down the field and he can run. So, I think that would help just bring an extra dynamic. I'm not saying bench Cade. I agree with you that he looked a little bit better against a very tough defense last week, but I think there's areas where you can get that package in and just present something different to a defense who hadn't seen it really on tape.
Yeah, I think you just have to take advantage of, talk about just doubling down at what you're really good at. Iowa still, even though they struggled for the majority of the time in Columbus against as good a defense as you're going to see. I mean, Ohio State's more or less the number one team in the country. I mean, Texas is very, very good, but that you're looking at a team that could easily win out. They got a real tough one against Oregon. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but do not totally jump to conclusions, I feel like, at least, what happened on Saturday in Columbus, because that is, you got a true freshman who's just one-handing catches and and they're set up so well after turnovers. Like, that's just, you just watch the peak of what college football could be in 2024 in Columbus. That is as good a team as in the nation right now.
Yeah, that's as good as you're going to get, and is the one bright spot on this team is that one topic of conversation between us and the players yesterday during our media availability was like, as much as it's tough being 3-2 right now, like, you guys still have so much in front of you. Like, your goals are in front of you. Like, you guys know that you still have the possibility to win out, and they would not say our toughest hurdle is behind us, but I think if you read between the lines, that's, I think, the idea right now, is that our toughest challenge, a team that is probably going to compete for a national title this year, probably be a top 4, if not the number 1 seed in the CFP come a few months from now. Like, they're now behind us. Now we can focus on what's in front of us. Yeah.
At the same time, though, I think it's going to be very difficult to, if your goal is a Big Ten title and CFP to win every game on the schedule, that's never easy, Right. Especially when we got a lot of question marks. I still think, even after a 5-game sample, what is this Washington team? What is Nebraska? Yeah. What is Wisconsin? They've had some weird results, going up 21 at the Coliseum and then losing that game, and then, Purdue looks like the worst team. They blew them out last week. But, there's just going to be, I think each week's going to be a battle, and it starts, with a team that you haven't played in 30 years. Yeah. Or 28, whatever it is.
In regards to the quarterback situation, too, something interesting. I hadn't realized that. I think David Eichholt was the first one to point it out this weekend, was that Cade McNamara hasn't thrown a touchdown against a Power 4 opponent since the Big Ten championship game against Iowa in 2021. Of course, there's extenuating circumstances between that point and this point, but it's going to continue to be a challenge for him to do that, only because Brendan Sullivan is kind of the red zone guy right now. So there's probably a couple of touchdowns that maybe Cade could have thrown this year if he was the quarterback inside the 10, inside the 5-yard line. But,
and because Caleb has 10 touchdowns, if he's going to break it.
It's a stat that can grab eyes, but again, we talked about context. Like, Caleb, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but at least half of his touchdown runs have been 20 plus, right? I mean,
sure.
The big chunk of his total runs overall have gone for at least 20. So, yeah, you look at the passing stats, you haven't had a passing touchdown since the little pitch to Ostrenga against Troy. It's like, yeah, but they're still scoring, so at least for the most part. So you got to be happy with that, I suppose.
I have one piece of inside info that's a somewhat non-football related, but at least a special guest that's going to be in the building for the game on Saturday against Wisconsin, a special recruit from the West Coast.
Washington?
From California.
You said Wisconsin, you mean the Washington.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've probably done that a few times this week, called this the Wisconsin game, the Washington game. Addie Deal, Iowa basketball, 5-star recruit. She's going to be on her official visit this Saturday, or excuse me, this whole weekend probably, but she's going to be in the crowd. I don't know if she'll be on the field somewhere, probably hanging around with Jan Jensen and Sid Falter and Hannah Stolke and the rest of the crew, but she's going to be in the building for the game on Saturday, so good chance to put on a show for somebody who's going to be suiting up for the Hawkeyes come next year.
Yeah, good deal.
Yeah.
If you're not watching the video, my mic didn't go out. I'm just staring at Mike. Just really didn't need to do that.
Over under that Bill Belichick's there too.
Ooh.
Steve Belichick is the defensive coordinator for Washington. I don't think he's been at a Washington game. Actually, I don't know. They didn't mention it on Saturday, so probably low, but, always got to throw it out there.
We'll say Brock Heward, the color commentator in the booth for Fox Sports, a Washington grad, so interesting there. And then Jason Benetti on the play-by-play. One of the busiest men in sports right now, calling the Tigers in the postseason. They got Game 3 at Comerica. I was covering the Tigers the last time they had a home game in the postseason, so excited to see what they do with a team that's not starting Andrew Romine and Don Kelly. I looked up the Tigers roster 10 years ago for their last postseason home game.
You could have just made up all those names and I wouldn't.
The only guy,
Old Donnie Kelly.
The only guy who's still playing is Nick Castellanos, and he was still playing third base for the Tigers.
Really?
And heck of a player, certainly, and having big postseason moments here in 2024. Enough about the MLB postseason, though. We turn to our Hawkeye highlight now. This Jay Higgins kid, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he is he's not on pace for 171 tackles in 2024, but 48 so far this year. You've heard from him already. Nice to get a little extended conversation with a guy that I think we always enjoy having extended conversations with on Tuesday and Saturdays, considering the outcome of the games. But our Hawkeye highlight this week, Jay Higgins, senior captain. You know him well. Let's get a little extended time with number 34.
I remember at the truck stop in the offseason, you said you didn't want to be someone that could just get by on ability. Like, you wanted to dive into the mental game. I think it would be easy for you to, coast this season knowing what you did last season. Why not?
Well, they didn't want me last season. That's why I came back. So I bet not coast. I better get better.
You mean NFL?
Yeah. So I'm coast. I might be out of job. But yeah, I love the student side of it. I tell Wallace they don't want me in NFL. I might come back in GA and stuff. start from scratch. But I just love the student side. Just knowing where the ball's going. Just the X's and O's of the game, and if I can get an advantage before the ball snap, I just think it's cool. I don't know. I think watching tape's pretty fun. I don't know, just finding details and stuff. I'd rather watch tape than watch TV or a TV show. I like watching tape. Just something just sitting in the film room by yourself, finding stuff that'll help you play faster.
Sorry, go ahead, Tyler.
No, I was going to say, I know you say jokingly they didn't want you, but there would have been someone that would have drafted you at some point.
I hope. They should have called me.
But is that motivation?
Yeah. I was talking to Sully. Sully was a 3-star. He was at 89 on 247 or something like that. So it's he was almost a 4-star. And I was at 81. So I was almost a 2-star. So I barely was a 3-star. And I'm my whole career, I've just kind of been an underdog. So I guess you could say I had that motivation my whole career. I feel like I play best when people doubt me. So that's where I like to tell myself that nobody wants me. So I just keep playing harder.
And that is how you build the chip on a shoulder. We've talked so much about Jamari and the season he's having, and you have to imagine him against Denzel Boston is going to be a fun matchup on Saturday. But, because Jay's not on this crazy record-setting pace, which is a good thing, defense is on the field as much, guys aren't getting into the second level, but he's about as enjoyable as a guy. I think he won that the Golden Gavel? Is that the media award last year?
Oh, yeah, I think you're right.
And he's been a correspondent for us a few times where he just
Great interview.
He starts trying to talk to guys and I just slip in the mic, go ahead. He's about as, and when you hear him talk like that, you'd rather watch film than a TV show. There's so much to binge out there, you might as well just keep it simple. Just watch your film.
There's certain people that, sometimes the fans of Hawkeyes or just college sports fans in Iowa like to give the media a hard time for bowing down to the Hawkeyes, bowing down to Kirk Ferentz, et cetera. And overall, it's largely untrue. But there's every now and then there's a select player or coach who is I feel like every media member really would go to bat for. It's Jan Jensen, I would give my life for that woman. She's just the best. Hayden Large is another guy that it's every media member absolutely loves that guy. Jay Higgins is another kid that it's everybody that kid comes in contact with, media or otherwise, just absolutely adores him. Just the nicest guy in the world. And it's so easy to root for that kid.
And he says a lot of interesting things. Every Tuesday when you get your clips loaded up and I'm watching them for the podcast, I almost watch them which they're trained to do. Like, they don't say anything, blah, blah, blah. It's the same answer. But Jay always has something interesting. That's why I wanted to do this, because it's like, dude, you're like the best linebacker in the country right now.
I will say, inside baseball, and for those watching at home or listening, Clips Loaded Up is video being loaded into our system that we
Clip
watch.
that, Chad.
I was just going to make and I forget if I've even made this parallel on this podcast before, that Jay Higgins is like the Kate Martin of the Hawkeye football teams in terms of
He's
both
the glue.
Yes, he is the glue. He's the team captain. He's a guy who, Kate was the same way, where it's like, you know that a lot of these people, Caitlin included, Lisa, the other players are going to say the sound bites that we kind of expect them to say. But Kate, she did that, but she also did it in a way that, like, we're still learning something. We're still getting some good quality information from her. And Jay Higgins is the same way. Kate was obviously, as well, one of the most likable people in the world. And Jay Higgins brings me a lot of those same kind of memories that Kate did.
And he's a guy who, listen, Kate could get her numbers and continues to sometimes get numbers in the W. Jay, we've seen time and again put up massive tackle numbers, but he's also a guy that, even if he only has 4 or 5 tackles in a game, don't ever tell me Jay Higgins isn't having some sort of impact out there, keeping guys together. I mean, he's been a captain for the last, 20 straight games now?
Yeah,
I think this will be his 20th game as a captain. For a guy who wasn't playing a whole heck of a lot before becoming a starter last year, he is, I think, everything you want. And to his credit, talking about almost being a 2-star, and now talking about him as one of the great linebackers of the last decade or 2 decades here in Iowa.
And I made this point to Mike on Monday, so I'm kind of repeating myself here. But last week when we talked to Jay and we were talking about how tough that Ohio State offense was, one thing he said was, I believe that if you want to play in the NFL and compete against NFL guys, you've got to compete against the best guys at this level and compete against guys who are going to play in the NFL. And on Saturday, he showed that he can do exactly that with 14 tackles. He's showing people week in and week out. He's showing NFL scouts that he's got what it takes to. First-round draft pick might be a bit of a stretch at this point, but got to be at least a day 2 guy right now.
I think he can be what Josie Jewell was, Pat Anger. I mean, those are guys who hold down the middle. Jack Campbell, certainly. Jack obviously doing big things with the Lions and higher expectations, being a first-round pick, but he is more than carrying the torch for the middle linebacker spot for Iowa. He has been, again, everything you would want, and it's just been, again, he's a fun guy to talk to. He's really knowledgeable and has a lot of great insight on a lot of stuff, so he's everything you could want.
Yeah, and just a little fact check on his, he acting like he's not going to get drafted next year. Pro Football Focus has him as the 138th best player on their big board, first middle linebacker on the board, highest graded. Another fact check for, we have a Washington Husky fan in the chat who said Bill Belichick was at the game last week. They didn't mention it on the broadcast, or I missed it. Sometimes I skip ahead.
Everything Bill would want in that.
Yeah. So maybe he will be in Iowa City this week. You guys have to look out for him.
And of course, a lot of history there with Kirk. So if he was going to show up to an Iowa football game, this might be the one. Let's turn to our picks, because this is my favorite part of the day, and certainly a reminder of why I don't pick college football outside of this situation. Boy, that Oregon game, we were all so close, guys.
They turned the ball over like 3 times in the first half.
Dylan Gabriel had a couple of early turnovers, but Michigan State scores late to cover that spread. So
that was on bad beats, by the way.
As well it should have been. So that's a look at what we had for last week. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, this is the only time more insight
in the middle.
Baseball. We don't use Excel a whole lot in the TV news business, so this is like the one time I see spreadsheets throughout a working week. But what were the final tallies there, Mike, for those that don't have the visual?
Oh, we kind of went over on Monday, but I went 0 for 5. Ooh. Owen went 1 for 4, and you went 2 for 3.
I went 2 for 3.
2 and 3.
2 and 3.
Yeah.
Washington and Wisconsin.
Let me have this.
Were your winners? You were the only one to pick the Huskies, so you picked right.
Mitch, it's weird. I think Michigan figured something out, I think, with Tuttle, but it's also they're just, you talk about 2 teams that are not the teams they were last year and still figuring things out, and Michigan be on a little higher stage, and we're watching a little closer because it's the Big Ten. We've watched the growing pains really show up at times. But we'll turn now to this week, and we'll start with the late game on Friday. You'll watch it on Fox 28 Northwest.
Might not be on Fox 28.
It might not be?
If there's a Game 5, Fox has told us they're going to put that on.
MLB post.
But if they don't, it's Padres and Dodgers. If that's not a Game 5, if someone clinches before then, I guess it'd be the Padres because they're up 2-1.
Padres and Dodgers, that's a big game here in Eastern Iowa.
But if they're done with the series on Friday, then it'd be Phillies, Mets. But if they're both done, then we get Northwestern, Maryland.
There you go.
So there's a lot of contingencies.
So hope everybody wrote that down. Fun little factoid, though. So Jared Aarons, former sports director at KGAN, is now a morning anchor at KGTV, which is the ABC affiliate in San Diego. He is refusing to wear blue, Dodger blue, or any kind of blue, during this entire series. So he's been wearing brown tones only for the Padres and will not wear any blue. And if you're listening from San Diego or you're familiar with that, go look at Jared's post every day because he is staunchly anti-Dodger, pro-Padre, and it's been fun to see him continue to have some of the fun stuff on the news side that he showed for 10 years here doing sports at KGAN. So whatever time or wherever you can watch this game, 7 p.m. Friday, Northwestern at Maryland. Wildcats going in as a 9.5-point dog against the Terps.
I'd say I'm a Maryland fan in this game. Coming off a loss to Indiana, who is proving themselves to be like maybe a Big Ten title contender. Man, Indiana looks good. Maryland beat UConn early in the season, who right now is 4-2, the Fighting Dan Orlovskis. So I think I like Maryland to comfortably win this one.
This one's interesting just because it's on a Friday, and funny thing about this series, home teams won the last 3 meetings. It's in Maryland this year, so I think Maryland's going to win. But Northwestern has covered the last 4 times. So just so I don't pick favorites in every single game, because that never works out for me, I'm going to pick the Wildcats.
I'm going to take Maryland to cover because I don't think this is a Northwestern team that would measure up to the last 4 times, and this is a pretty good Maryland team as well. So Northwestern, I don't think can cover, and this could be a double-digit win. I believe it will be a double-digit win for the...
Well, we're having some trouble with Excel, so I'm going to write this down.
Oh, wow. Mike, if you're watching on YouTube, you are seeing a lot of code pop up that I have never seen in an Excel spreadsheet.
There we go.
I don't know if Mike's trying to hack a mainframe right now or what's happening, but I am frightened by the numbers and characters that I'm seeing on screen. We'll move on, and hopefully the world will right itself here. Wisconsin at Rutgers, that's your 11 a.m. kick on BTN on Saturday. The Badgers 2.5-point underdogs going into Piscataway to take on the Scarlet Knights.
This is a tricky game. Wisconsin's a team that we really, I don't think, know super well yet. I mean, their 2 losses are to Alabama and USC, who at the time was ranked 13th. They beat Purdue, beat a solid South Dakota team, a really good FCS program, beat Western Michigan by 2 scores. I still don't quite know what to expect out of Wisconsin, but I kind of like them to
2.5.
Possibly win out in this game.
You got Wisconsin plus 2.5. You know, this one's tricky too because, Rutgers, last time they were at home, they beat this Washington team that we all think are pretty good. And again, Washington outgained them about 2-1 on the yardage, missed 3 field goals, and one of them was to tie the game. And Rutgers suffered a defeat in Lincoln last week. It was 14-0 for most of the game and 14-7. But I just think, with Kyle Mongongai, that rushing attack, Wisconsin has the 65th best rushing defense. It's not a typical Badger rush defense. I think they're going to be able to control the ball, and I'm going to pick Rutgers to win at home.
I'm going to do the same. It would not shock me if Wisconsin covers. It wouldn't shock me if Wisconsin wins outright. I think just it being in Jersey, Mongongai running the way he does, this is a tough-nosed Rutgers team, and I like them. And, of course, they've got a starting quarterback in Nathan Kaliak-Manis who's won in Madison before, so whatever that's worth. He's beat the Badgers before during his days at Minnesota, and now he's with the Scarlet Knights. A big one on CBS 2, your 2:30 game. Penn State at USC. Trojans coming off that loss in Minnesota. Penn State looks as good as anybody. They're 4.5-point favorites in the Coliseum. What do we think, Nittany Lions and USC?
I can start on this one. Yeah, Penn State, they've looked pretty good, like you said, but they've also had some shaky moments against Bowling Green, Illinois, who I think is a good football team. They struggled to pull away late, but did so in a whiteout, I believe, in Happy Valley. They're traveling to the West Coast. Did you guys hear this stat? Read this stat? Big Ten teams traveling 2 time zones are 1-8 this year. Yep. The only win is Indiana at UCLA in the Rose Bowl. I bring that up only to go against that because I think when you look at this USC team, I think this LSU win is a little bit not as good as we thought. Week 1, they suffered defeats at Michigan and at Minnesota, which I think was a shocking loss last week. So I think the Nittany Lions will be able to cover and win by a touchdown or 10 points.
Mitch, you go next. I'm still thinking.
What's, I think, most concerning for USC coming into this game is that the loss in the Big House against a team that really runs the football well. You lose to Minnesota against a team that has kind of switched. We talked about how great of a passer Max Brosmer was. Fleck and company are just going all in on the run, as I think they should. I mean, they've got a great offensive line, some great backs. Brosmer had 3 rushing touchdowns. You've got a Penn State team that's really good on the ground. You know, Drew Aller's a fantastic quarterback, but this is a really strong rushing attack. Having said all that, I think USC can just attack through the air and maybe get right that way. I think they cover. I think Penn State still wins, so I think this is a field goal game, or maybe it's a 28-24 ball game. But I think USC shows a little life. You know, they got hit in the mouth against Wisconsin and figured things out. But Penn State, that backfield, as they've been doing the last couple of years, I think they can have a lot of success. But I think USC
close game.
Things up. Maybe we get a little bit of a shootout there. Could maybe a big defensive stand on one way or the other, but I'll take the Trojans to cover at home.
I think I like Penn State in this game only because of the recent struggles USC has had. I feel like at this point, I don't know if they have the capacity to look past 2 recent losses. I think after 3 games, they thought, boy, we're going to be a national championship contender. But a couple losses now, wheels maybe are coming off a little bit. Players are possibly losing a little bit of hope. I think I like Penn State in this one.
And if you thought that game was big, 6:30 on NBC, you almost hate that this is a quote-unquote early game because this will have playoff feel to it. And heck, could be a playoff preview going down the road. Could be a preview of what comes in Indy, so possibly. Ohio State on the road in Autzen against number 3 Oregon, the number 2 Buckeyes, 3.5-point favorites. Who you got?
I am still very much not sold on Oregon as a title contender this year. They are 5-0. Yes, they're ranked 3rd, but just so many wins that are like kind of unimpressive. It took them a while to pull away from Idaho. They only beat them by 10. Beat Michigan State by 21. Okay, fine. They beat UCLA by 21. I mean, UCLA is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. Okay, fine. They beat Boise State by 3, who, I mean, obviously Boise State's great, but still just does not have the look to me of a team that's going to compete for a national championship this year. I think I like Ohio State to win this one by possibly 2 scores.
Okay, yeah. You know, I am going to go. This is going to be a game of the week, obviously, no doubt. Yeah. I guess I'm a little more bullish on Oregon. I think Boise State's an excellent team that they beat. I think their resume, if you compare it to Ohio State's, like, I know this Iowa defense is good and it was 7-0 at half, but look at the rest of their schedule and they haven't really had a test. You can say the same thing about Oregon, but I think that Boise State win is still impressive.
Sure.
I think this is going to be close. I'm not going to predict Oregon's going to win, but I do think it's a field goal game. So then that leads me to take the points, whoever has them. So I'm going to go Oregon plus 3.5.
Right. You just took everything I was going to say. So I'll do the same. If Dylan Gabriel and
stole your notes, huh?
All the football he's been playing, you don't see him throw multiple interceptions. I think he has, since 2020, I think he's got 3 games now where he's thrown multiple interceptions. If you take those away in the early going, they'd boat race Michigan State, and Michigan State scored late to kind of clean it up. That offense is really, really good. And the Buckeyes aren't too shabby on offense either. I think this will be a wild one where a field goal does decide it. Just one defense is going to get 1 stop, and it's going to be a pick that decides it. So I'll take Oregon because it's at home. That's going to be a fun one. That's going to be a wild one. It wouldn't shock me, though, and I don't think it'd shock anybody if Ohio State goes in and wins, because, again, Ohio State, to me, looks like a number 1 team and is everything that I think a lot of people thought Oregon would be. It's just, this could be the get-right game for Oregon. So it's tough to say there's a get-right game when you're 5-0, but you want a statement, Dan Lanning? Do this one for clicks. Get a little stuff going here and get the nation believing in the Ducks again.
I actually, and to your point about Dylan Gabriel, I trust him more than I trust Will Howard. The one thing I was kind of disappointed last week, there were several things, but like that Iowa didn't put some pressure on him. If they would have scored, at least a touchdown in the first half and taking the lead, maybe with that field goal. Hey, Will, can you do it under pressure? Because he hasn't had to do that here. And I know last year, at Kansas State, it was iffy, but I think if we're talking quarterbacks and it's going to be a close game, I think I'm going to take Gabriel over Howard. But, it's good to, either or, though, because I think both quarterbacks are pretty good, and their weapons are what really lets their offense shine.
And it's the travel, too,
Yeah.
Not to completely sell out on time zone stuff, and it's a late game, but it's a 3 time zone jump for the boys from Columbus. So that's just a little interesting wrinkle. You get 3 less hours, so to speak, to prep. But that's going to be a fun one over on NBC. And we turn back to the game that you get to watch on Fox 28 at 11 a.m. Washington at Iowa. Hawks are a 2.5-point home favorite against the Huskies.
What does an Iowa win look like? What's the pathway to victory?
There's no answer to that. We've seen them win every which way.
I think it's, taking control on the ground and winning the time of possession and really putting it on that Washington Husky defense. And that's what I'm hoping for, tight spread. It's been like that. Not a lot of movement. But I'm going to go with just that trend of the traveling until it totally flips on its head. So if this was a bigger spread, I might take Washington to cover, but I'll take Iowa 2.5.
I think that, as I pointed out with a field goal or kicker earlier for Washington, I think it's a type of game that could come down to something like that. Maybe a missed field goal or a missed PAT by Washington's kicker could be the difference in this one. I think I like Washington to keep it close.
Did you take Washington with points?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take Iowa to cover. I think it comes down to running the football and protecting the ball. Outside of that third quarter in Columbus, Iowa's been great at protecting the football. So I think getting home, being the friendly confines, I think that's a big thing. Washington has to travel. Watch that Denzel Bosch and Jamari Harris matchup, though. That, as much as anything, will decide the game. And watch what they do against that other corner, whether it's expect Deshaun to be out there, Deshaun Lee starting at the other one. We've seen other teams almost every single game pick on the non-Harris side of the ball. Do we see that continue? And this front seven's got to do a heck of a job against Coleman, a guy who's come in and, we talk about this passing offense because of all the big names on it, but Jonah Coleman is as good as any other back in the country and is playing really, really well. So watch him out of the backfield, too. We've seen that. They've got tight ends that can stretch, but I still think this is a statement game for the Iowa defense, and I think they can get right at home. So I will take Iowa to cover, go to 4-2, and get ready for that Michigan State game. They got the night game on NBC next week, but you got to win this one first.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention when I was making my pick, but when I was looking at the red zone metrics, on these teams, Washington, when you're talking about all those missed field goals, they rank pretty low in the country on that, 110th on offense and in scoring once you get to the red zone. And even then, they've had 24 attempts and only 12 TDs, which is about 50%. The other 6 were field goals, and they missed not all the field goals they missed were in the red zone, but a couple of them were. That's kind of like the style of defense that Iowa thrives on, We'll let you get the yards between the 40s, but once you get in that red zone, we're going to shut it off. So I like that matchup a lot if you can prevent them from getting into the end zone.
Yeah, that'll be big again. I'll keep going back to Boston, just a big target in the red zone, and Jonah Coleman, a guy who runs really hard. So that'll be key, and we'll see how the Hawks rise to the occasion. Final thoughts before we wrap things up.
One thing that the players are looking for, we talked about this, another topic of conversation during the interviews yesterday was just, there's a lot, we reference it so often with the new era of college football, whether it be conference realignment or the transfer portal or whatever, but this is kind of one of the fun aspects of the new era is the conference realignments and getting a chance to renew these rivalries, getting a chance to see a new opponent. You're not just playing the same teams on the schedule every year. So I don't know. I think the players look forward to games like this where they're seeing an opponent they traditionally have not seen before.
I'm interested in another matchup, Washington's O-line against Iowa's D-line. Sure. I thought Washington's offensive line played pretty well last week. I think Will Howard was still pressured on nearly half of his throws, but he was able to complete a lot of those. But someone in the chat said one of their linemen is supposed to be out this week, so that could be one of those small factors that you don't really think about until it's in the game. And Iowa defense has got a few sacks, so one of the things to watch out for.
And maybe Washington learns the lesson that some other West Coast teams have learned in the Big Ten, that the trenches matter when you get into conference play in the Big Ten. You lose a lineman, and that can change a little bit of everything. So we'll see what happens there. 11 a.m. on Fox 20. Only a second 11 a.m. kick, I think, for Iowa. This is more inside local TV sports problems. The late nights on Friday covering high school football and then having to turn around first thing the next morning. Mm-hmm. We haven't had to deal with a lot of those. Yep. I think a lot of people in the local sports industry aren't complaining about getting a little extra sleep on Saturday, as much as you sleep between Friday and Saturday.
Very precious little.
Buddy the Elf sleep schedules there.
Illinois State, that was the 11 o'clock kickoff. Was Troy not an 11 a.m. kickoff? When did that game?
2:30. Yeah.
So first 11 a.m. kick since the opener. I imagine people will still be at Kinnick at 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. They tend to get out there pretty early for this kind of stuff. We'll recap, of course, everything Monday at 1 o'clock. We'll see how things go. Getting back to Kinnick. Been a while since we've been there. So for Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. We will see you on the other side of a game where we're going to see a lot of Rose Bowl and Sun Bowl shirts in Kinnick Stadium. I'm sure a lot of fans celebrating this one. The players are happy. I think the fans will be hyped for a little nostalgia, too. We'll recap it all on Monday here on Eye on the Hawks.